Okay, so welcome back. We've got a couple more conditional statements before we start to validate this code, or validate the user input. Sorry. The first one I want to do is I want to check if this is a valid email address, or a valid email address has been provided. Then I'm going to go ahead and quickly write a function called email_exists, much like the user exists. So we're basically just going to copy and paste it. It's just a copy and paste job, and then we're going to give a user, some more feedback. We're going to be making use of our output errors function that we created in order to actually display these errors to the user. So very, very quickly we'll finish off this this validation part of the registration process. So I'm going to check if the user's email address that they entered is valid. So I'm going to say if filter_var. So I'm using the filter var function. Essentially this takes a string and then how you want to validate this particular input. In this case we want to input the email address. And the second parameter is a constant here, which is filter validate email. Essentially we're passing that through and just saying validate this as a valid email address. Now valid email address is probably not what you think. We could get away with typing something like alex@internet. I don't know, AAA for example, as a domain extension. While this isn't a valid domain extension, it might not even be a host that's online. It's essentially just checking the way that this string is formed. It's just a quicker way than doing a regular expression, as we did up here. But let's go ahead and do this anyway. It should be enough really to get us started. So we want to append to our errors array, and we'll just say a valid email address is required. Okay, done. So the next thing we want to do is check whether the email exists. So if email exists is equal to true, and we obviously want to pass through the email address. We're going to do exactly the same as we did here with the username. In fact, I'm just going to substitute that with email. I'm going to say, sorry, the email is already in use. So I'm just saying, the same thing as I did before. So we've obviously used the email exists function, but we haven't written the email exists function yet. So within users.php, and I'm going to use this function, or I'm going to define this function within here. I'm going to copy and paste this user exists function, and I'm going to go ahead and obviously change the name of it to email exists, and instead of taking the username, we're taking email. We want to sanitize the email and write that back to an email called variable. And we obviously need to change our query as well. Instead of selecting the count of user ID from users where the username equals username, we want to say select the count where email equals email, because if a user's already used an email address, it's very unlikely that we want a user to use that same email address again. So in this case it will return true if any user within our database table has that email address that the user is trying to register with. Otherwise it will return false, much like we did just with the username itself. So let's go ahead and fill out our form again and waste more time, and we'll see what happens here. Let's go ahead and fill it out properly so we avoid all of our errors. I'm going to say Alex. In fact, this is quite interesting. If I use, say, all capitals, how is that going to render, or how is that going to output with checking that that user exists? Now let's go ahead and test this. I'm going to enter all other valid data, so password, first name, and email address. Let's just go ahead and get rid of these. alex@phpacademy.org. Register. Sorry, the username Alex is already taken. A valid email address is required, which I'm not sure why that's happened. Let's just go ahead and check, because if filter var, equals false. We obviously need to check that against a value. So if it returns false, then that means the email address is invalid. So that's got rid of that. And sorry, the email alex@phpacademy.org is already in use. So we know that that works, but we also know that, sorry, the username Alex is already taken. So while passing it through to our MySQL query, we are not checking for specifically uppercase or lowercase. We're just checking the literal value of this string. So now let's go ahead and fill it out properly with a new username and some new user data. I'm going to say Billy, password again, Billy Garrett, and we'll just say billy@phpacademy.org. Click register, and hopefully no errors. It says the username Billy is already taken. That's because I inserted it earlier. Let me go ahead and just delete that value. So so let's go ahead and refresh the page and resubmit that data, and we've got no errors in our error array, and that's really good news because we've now gone through this process and validated the data, taking into account things like the username, blah blah blah. So what do we want to do now? Well, now we're going to go ahead and actually output the errors within our registration form, so the user can see any errors that they have, any errors that resulting in the validation of this form. So in the next part we'll go ahead and output these errors.